Good morning and welcome to the Planning and Placemaking Committee of the 6th of September 2023. I'm Councillor Ian Massey and I'm the convener of this committee. I now introduce the top table to you, and from my far left is Councillor Grant Stewart, my vice convener, Ms Jessica Guild, Committee Service Officer, Mr Colin Elliott, Solicitor, and on my right Mr Christian Smith, Development Management and Building Standards Service Manager, Mr Sean Panton, Team Leader Major Developments, and Mr Paul Williamson, Team Leader Local Developments. Now, the housekeeping, as this is a hybrid meeting, members joining virtually are reminded that if you leave the meeting during consideration of any application, you are unable to participate or vote on that item when you return to the meeting. This also means that if a member loses their internet connection during consideration of any item, they should not vote on that item. Please advise the clerk via the meeting chat that you are leaving the meeting, or if you have lost your connection and are therefore unable to vote on that item. And whilst we are operating as a hybrid meeting today, can I remind councillors and officers to use the chat box to attract my attention, Q for questions, C for comment. I will now ask the clerk to confirm any apologies and the attendance of those in the chamber and online.
Thank you, Convener. We have apologies today from Councillor Cuthbert and Bailey Williamson. We have Councillor McPherson substituting for Bailey Williamson. We have 3 members online who I'll ask to confirm they're present, please. Councillor James.
Morning, Jess. Present.
Councillor Leishman.
Good morning, Jess. Yes, I'm here.
And Councillor Reid.
Morning, yes, present.
Thank you. All other members are present in the chambers, Convener.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? No, none. Item 3, the minute of the meeting of the Planning and Placemaking Committee of the 9th of August 2023. Can we agree the content of the minute? Deputations today. Item 4. There are no deputations requests in relation to today's item of business, but we do have the applicant available to take questions if members so wish on item 5.2.1. I can also advise the committee that in line with Standing Order 19.9, Councillor Liz Barrett will address the committee in relation to item 5.1.1. Thank you. Item 5, applications for determination. 5.1.1 is a major application. It is a mixed-use development comprising residential business class 4, general industry class 5, storage and distribution class 6, shops class 1, financial, professional and other services class 2, food and drink class 3, hotels class 7, non-residential institutions class 10, bus depot, car parking, the Perth Innovation Highway, hydrogen fueling, charging centre, formation of road, junction, underpass and road network, road alterations, footpaths, cycleways, green space, landscaping and associated works in principle. And to introduce the report, Mr Panton, thank you.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, councillors. As stated, the first item on the agenda today is the major planning application in principle at Perth West. This application was previously before the Planning and Development Management Committee on the 1st of June 2021, where the committee was minded to approve the application subject to a Section 75 legal agreement being in place. This Section 75 legal agreement is now very near completion and we will soon be in a position to release a decision notice as agreed by the committee. However, at the time of the application going to the committee in June 2021, National Planning Framework 4 was not part of the development plan and thus was not considered. As MPF 4 is now part of the development plan, the application is required to come back to committee for full consideration, including assessment of the relevant MPF 4 policies. The recommendation remains as an approval subject to conditions and the legal agreement being concluded. The conditions and informatives remain the same as the previous report, with the exception of the update that was circulated to members this morning. Due to a change in government legislation, what was previously included as a direction in the original report now requires to be a condition. This direction will therefore be converted into a condition at the end of the existing conditions, and as such will be condition number 57. The wording of the new condition will also be updated to reflect the change in legislation as per the updated circular. For the benefit of the committee, I will now take members through a short presentation to identify the Perth West site and to remind those members who were part of the previous committee. Next slide, please. As the name would suggest, the site is to the west of Perth on land which is currently used primarily for agriculture and woodland. The site is approximately 257 hectares with active farm groupings at East Mid Lamberkin and West Mid Lamberkin. There are 7 other residential properties within the site boundaries. The A9 dual carriageway bounds the site to the south and the east. Next slide, please. Here we have an extract from our local development plan showing the site allocation, shown as MU70 and denoted by the red arrow. A large proportion of the application site is contained within this allocation. The full extent of the MU70 allocation does not form part of this application. Next slide, please. Here we have an existing site plan. On this plan, you can see the relationship with the A9 and the Broxton roundabout more clearly. The previously mentioned farms, East Mid Lamberkin and West Mid Lamberkin, are shown by the pink stars. Next slide, please. Sorry, back one. Sorry, we appear to be missing a slide there. But if we go forward, sorry. Yeah, that one, thank you. So here we have an illustrative master plan which gives a better feel of what is proposed. On this plan, you can make out the extent of the green networks and landscaping. I will now take committee through some photographs from key locations surrounding the site. First image, please. So this first photograph shows the roundabout on Tweed Place next to the Broxton Dental Surgery and the Perth Porsche Garage. This roundabout is where the road will connect, which leads to the underpass under the A9. The yellow arrow shows roughly where the underpass will be located. Next slide, please. This next image shows part of the site when viewed from the Broxton roundabout. This area of the site is currently in active agricultural use as seen. Next slide, please. This photograph shows the A9 travelling north towards Inverarmid roundabout from Broxton. The site is to the left of the image beyond the tree belt. Next slide, please. This image is taken on the A9 travelling towards Broxton from the Stirling direction. Perth is just visible in the distance, denoted by the orange arrow. Next image, please. This photograph shows East Mid Lamberkin Farm, which is one of the active agricultural units within the site. The site surrounding the farm forms part of the application. Next slide, please. This final photograph shows the other farm previously mentioned, being West Mid Lamberkin Farm. Again, the site surrounding the farm in the image forms part of the site. Next slide, please. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes my presentation. I will leave members with the illustrative master plan for reference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patton. I'll now hand over to the Vice Convener to continue the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Can I call on Councillor Liz Barrett? Good morning, Councillor Barrett. You're wishing to address the committee. I will give you 10 minutes and I'll give you a prompt after my 9 minutes to let you summarise in the last minutes. When you're ready, I'll start the clock.
Thank you very much, Vice Convener, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, Convener. I'm aware this development was previously considered under our last administration and might not be familiar to all the current members of the committee, and I'm very grateful to Mr. Panton for his presentation just now. Although the bulk of the site is in Ward 9, you can see from the diagram on the right-hand side that the boundary with my ward 10 is of Perth City South is the dual carriageway, and the underpass access route comes through into Tweed Place as shown in the slides, and towards Lamberkin Drive. As recognised in the traffic assessments, this development will have a significant impact on traffic in both directions in Lamberkin Drive between the Glasgow Road and Cedar Place Ettrick Drive, and on some residents on the western edge of Perth. And I would ask officers that going forward, they add reference to Ward 10, Perth City South, to materials and notices about this development with the reference P10 so that they're flagged to local councillors. On this occasion, I'm very grateful to Bailey McLaren for highlighting this paper to me. I do welcome this review and update to ensure that proper regard's being given to NPF4 for this exciting new development for Perth, but I'd like to highlight some concerns regarding the development and its impact on my ward in particular. A key concern is traffic management during and after construction. As Mr Panton showed, the proposed underpass goes under the A9 dual carriageway and comes out at Tweed Place near Broxton Business Park. That will be the access for all traffic, including construction traffic, throughout phases 1 and 2, which were highlighted in the papers with the original application, until the A9 interchange is built, where the Tippermore junction is at the moment, apart from a proposed emergency access at East Lamberkin Farm. There is a requirement for a through route to the A85 road to Crieff, but that isn't due until phase 4, which is potentially in the 2030s, if I remember rightly. So the underpass will come out onto Lamberkin Drive between the Park and Ride roundabout on Glasgow Road and Cedar Drive, Ettrick Drive. The traffic, emissions and dust will impact residents in much of the Western Edge and Oak Bank, and those using those paths in the area on foot or by cycle. There's a path runs along the burn below Cedar Place and round by the Western Edge. It'll also affect the flow of traffic on the Broxton roundabout, where existing issues are well known, and Transport Scotland don't yet appear to have plans to address them. I realised preparing for this, I wrote that in May 2021, and sadly, it still is true today. As many of you know, Perth City South has been seriously impacted by flooding in the last few years, particularly in August 2020 and September 2022. Residents are understandably very concerned about the impact on flood risk of new developments, as it becomes clear that existing drainage and sewage systems don't cope with all surface water runoff. Flooding is referred to on page 16 of your papers, which says that water flows to the west, but there is also potential flood impact from severe weather events at the underpass. And I'm asking that the details of all the drainage arrangements, when available, are assessed and scrutinised very carefully to address this. There are also concerns about the noise disturbance and air and light pollution impacting residents in the area around Lamberkin Drive and the Western Edge during and after construction, and I trust that these will be addressed when the details of the application come before you. These are all serious concerns, many of which have impacts beyond the residents of my ward. I note that it's recommended that this application be approved without any significant changes to the conditions and informatives. And in reviewing the previous decision of June 2021, I'd be very grateful if the committee would please take account of the concerns I've highlighted and ensure that the arrangements are sufficiently robust for this development to provide the promised livable and sustainable places with the supporting infrastructure built in time, including the active and sustainable travel routes and the school, and with minimum disruption to residents and road users to bring all the benefits and the protections set out in NPF4 policies. Thank you again, Convener, for the permission to address the committee, and to all of you for listening. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett, are you willing to take some questions?
Yes, Vice Convener.
Members, can you use the chat function and submit your questions, please? There appears to be no questions, Councillor Barrett. I would like to ask one. Are you aware of the last committee and the discussions around flooding?
Not that, no, basically, but I'm glad to hear that you were. But no, I don't know what specifically you were talking about regarding flooding. I do know that planning are looking at it very seriously, though, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Braun.
Sorry about this. Sorry. You mentioned dust and noise, and I was on the regional committee which did this. I'm looking at, there are two conditions here which do say that this will be looked at the time. I mean, are you happy with that? That's page 61. Yep, conditions 32 and 33. Sorry.
I am happy with those conditions. It's just I'm keen that when details come through, these things are looked at very closely and the concerns of residents are taken into account and mitigation is put in place as much as possible. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett, there appears to be no further questions. Thank you for your time. And I'll hand you back to the convener.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Barrett. Members, do we have any questions for officers? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, I'd just like to say I agree 100% with all of Councillor Barrett's concerns. My major concern and wondering is I wonder how much collaboration and cooperation there has been up to this point with Transport Scotland regarding improving the dreadful situation that exists every day at Broxton Roundabout and is only going to get worse with this development.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Reid. Yes, Transport Scotland were a statutory consultee as part of this application, so we've engaged with them throughout the process. They have no objection to the application. However, they've recommended 17 conditions, which is quite significant, and we've applied all of those conditions to the report. But all those conditions are basically to ensure that all of the required upgrades that are required on the road infrastructure, particularly around Broxton, are forthcoming. But again, most of that would be part of a detailed application rather than in principle. But in answer to your question, we've had significant engagement with Transport Scotland on this application. They've no objection to the application subject to the 17 conditions. Thanks.
Just a follow-up, convener.
Go ahead, Councillor Reid.
Yeah, so are they going to actually improve Broxton Roundabout themselves?
Thank you. No, Transport Scotland are not proposing anything themselves as part of this application. Like I say, the conditions recommended, the onus will be on the applicant to deliver most of this.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks, convener. Mr. Panton, just as you know, I was on the original committee, and so my thoughts are very much the same. But there's 1,500 houses going in, or planned to go in at some stage, and there will be a health centre of some sorts. Now, as we know, there's considerable difficulties getting doctors at the moment. I know this comes up many times on planning, but I appreciate it's covered in LDP. But there's a concern, obviously, that you have 1,500 houses. Will there be sufficient manpower to man a health centre? Is that something we've thought about? I know it's something we think about, but obviously there's another 1,500 houses going in, and it came up at full council last week, as we know.
What you're talking about there is the provision of people to staff facilities. What we're looking at here is the delivery of infrastructure, so physical things. The responsibility for providing the staff to populate those facilities lies with the NHS and the Health and Social Care Partnership. So that's a matter for them to address if and when the likelihood is that they would require to staff those. But the planning permission itself relates to the provision of the physical facilities, but isn't able to control the staffing thereof, which is the responsibility, as I said, of the NHS and Health and Social Care Partnership.
Sorry, just as a follow-up to that, just confirm as well, the Director of Public Health was consulted as part of the application, and they've got no objection and support the provision of the health centre that's proposed.
Could I just have a quick follow-up on that? Obviously, the majority of the site is infrastructure, various things which probably won't depend upon a health centre anyway. But when we get to the approval matter specified for the housing, is there any way we can link in to ensure that we check to see that there is going to be manpower? I know it's stretching it again. I know what Mr. Smith said, but the health centre is the other items on this are not dependent on the health centre as such. But when we get to the housing, knowing what we know at the moment, with the difficulty getting GPs, is there some way of linking together that we would actually check again to see that this is a possibility that the manpower's there? Under condition, perhaps, I don't know.
In relation to the submission of matters that would require to be approved, including the provision of any healthcare related facilities, it would therefore be available to the NHS and Health and Social Care Partnership to provide any comment. However, as I said, the provision of staffing related to that falls out with planning control. So if there was still the understanding or belief or a viewpoint or perception that there was an inability to provide staffing, that wouldn't be a planning consideration. It would be for the NHS and Health and Social Care Partnership to ensure that their facilities were appropriately staffed.
Sorry, just another follow-up there, just to give you some reassurance that we would be looking at it again, if you like, is we would control that through the phasing and delivery plan, which is conditioned. So we wouldn't allow for all of the houses to be built, for example, without the facilities that are needed. That would be controlled through the phasing and delivery plan.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Convener. Just a kind of technical question. Just from the plan, the only access at the moment to this area is from Broxden, is that correct? So underneath the roads is for construction activity like Liz Barrett was talking about. Is there going to be another access planned? That's possibly too much detail at this stage, though.
Thank you. Yes, for construction, the underpass will be the main way. However, if you look at that plan that's on the screen there, just on the A9, there'll be an on-off slip onto the A9 on both directions. So just where it's kind of the green bit to the south, you can work out the slip roads. That won't be immediately at the start. So a lot of the construction will be the underpass, but that will be forthcoming. Over and above that, as the development progresses into the remainder of the MU70 allocation, you'll note there are road connections that will lead into the development at the north. And then there'll be the connection out to the Tivermore Road itself. So over time, there will be a lot of connections, but to start off with, it will just be the underpass. Sorry that I can't really see you because of this monitor.
Okay, that's fine, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thanks, Convener. And a couple of points that I was going to pick up on have already been sort of touched upon. And it would be remiss of me not to mention our former friend or former colleague and friend, councillor as he was then, Willie Wilson, who waxed lyrical about this and the impending cul-de-sac which we're going to get coming down to Broxden. I know he was concerned then, as I am now, and Councillor Barrett has already brought that up. So the question is, if it's going to be an underpass, will that mean at some point closure of the A9 to put the underpass in, and the ensuing chaos that will probably create, and also the other access, can that not be brought forward in the scheme of things, please? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor James. I think at this point that's a bit of speculation as to what might or might not happen, and these are unknowns, but there would be significant discussion and negotiation with all the roads authorities, whether that be Perth and Kinross Council as local roads authority and Transport Scotland as the trunk roads authority, to determine what an appropriate way of delivering the infrastructure was.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Convener. Just first, number one, transport disasters at Broxton roundabout, and what would I see on the plan? So it's just going to make it worse. Has the Scottish Transport Scotland reserved any land on the left as they're coming up to Broxton for the slip, which is meant to be pending on the A9? And the other side of it, the traffic's going to continue round to get to the underpass. It's going to continue round Broxton and cause delays overall to get into that section. There's also the Edinburgh Dundee section of the coming across from Fratton Bridge, which is meant to be a slip on that to get down the A9 Auchterarder South, to be done sometime. I've been chasing this thing for about 6 or 7 years and we're no further forward on that. This would be the time to get a comprehensive upgrade of Inveramond before we commence this development. The opportunity is to do it now and not cause the chaos that we're going to have doing all these things at a later date. Up to 10 years, I think we've extended the development as such. Depends on what conditions the Scottish Transport Scotland of the 17 conditions, where are they? Do you have them, or are they in this paper here? You know, can we comment on that, please?
Yeah, all the conditions are listed in the appendix, which were the conditions that were applied to the minded to grant decision taken in June 2021. So yes, they're all listed as part of the papers. But I think summarising perhaps what your question was, there are quite a number of conditions that relate to transport matters to ensure that the approach and the delivery through the phasing of the development is appropriate. Transport Scotland and our own transportation colleagues have been consulted on the application and are happy subject to those conditions. How the matters would be delivered in due course will be subject to further discussion as the evolution of the proposals come forward and the phasing associated to that. So we are comfortable as to the approach. How and what those details will be and whether or not there requires to be land take associated to it will all come forward, but the requirement will be that the infrastructure is delivered at the appropriate time for the level of development being provided at the time.
And will we as a planning committee be involved in the discussions of the proposals that are coming forward in time, or will they just disappear through the planning department and whatever, and we don't know about them or can't influence them in any way?
All development to come from this application will be subject to further applications for the matters specified in the conditions. So there will be an opportunity for Perth Kinross Council to be involved. In fact, we will require to approve any detail that comes forward, yes.
Thank you. Councillor James, you have another question.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I'm sorry, I didn't want to hog it. It was really a kind of follow-up to my earlier question about the access into the site from Broxton. Lessons learned from us, especially in my ward over in Strathtaylor, Bertha Park, where we find ourselves in a position where we conditioned for a trunk road, the A85, to be through, or a monetary compensatory measure, if you like, and the developers opted to allow us to complete the works at pretty much more cost to us. Can I be assured that this will not happen with this development, please, whereby we could end up potentially with more cost for infrastructure? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James. I'd direct your attention to condition 10, and for ease of reference, I'll just read it out for you. It says, no development shall commence until appropriate mitigation measures have been agreed to address the impact of the development at the Broxton roundabout on the A9 trunk road. The nature of the mitigation shall either be physical improvements to this junction in the form of traffic signals and widening of approaches, or a financial contribution in lieu of the said physical works. The details of the physical works or the level of financial contribution required shall be agreed in writing with the Planning Authority in consultation with Transport Scotland. So hopefully that answers your question, that conditional control will ensure we either get the money or the enhancements done.
Thanks for that. Sorry, convener, can I quickly come back on that, please?
Go ahead.
Sean, thanks for the answer. I really appreciate that, and I get that, but it seems to me we're in a similar situation to how we were with the A85 at Bertha Park, whereby the developer has the option for a financial contribution, which in time, as blown out of proportion, it's ended up costing us money which we weren't kind of expecting, but quite legally. But I just didn't want to be falling into the same trap. Thank you.
Yeah, the reason we have to offer a financial contribution as well is just because Broxton Roundabout itself isn't under the control of the applicant. So if we put a condition on that said you have to do X, Y, Z, if they weren't able to do that because Transport Scotland didn't agree or they didn't have the landowner rights, for example, then we have to offer an alternative. So that's why the condition is worded in that way. But I do accept your point.
Thank you.
Councillor Waters.
Thank you, convener. Just a question on traffic and condition 4. I don't know if that's one of the Transport Scotland conditions, and I assume it goes back to LDP. But this pause and review event that should happen in either 2035 or related to the multi-housing units or the employment land, and it very much mentions, which is should be an NPF4 issue, is the amount of modal shift, which in my understanding is aimed at potentially looking at less traffic on the road, and we're having more sustainable travel throughout the area. So if this review comes forward, does that put risk, or if there is a modal shift, does that then? I think what I want to understand is what would be the scope of this review, and within the further junctions that are due to be planned. Is that potentially then looking at the potential that if we do achieve the modal shift we need as a society away from car use, that these junctions may not be needed? Is that why the pause and reviews there, or am I reading too much into this? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll let my colleagues, Alex Dean from Transport, come in on that one. But just as in general terms, obviously 2035 is quite a bit off. It's over a decade away. And there's likely to be a significant change in the way we transport around these sort of developments. So this pause and review is to make sure that all the transport infrastructure is up to date with whatever our transport patterns are in 2035. And obviously it is quite hard to predict that now. But yeah, I don't know if my colleague Alex Deans would like to add anything to that. You're on mute, Alex, sorry.
Apologies. Thanks, Sean. Councillor Waters is correct what he's saying. It is to do with modal shift. We expect there will be some changes over the years. It's such a long time period, but we don't really know. So, but the main reason for the pause and review was because it was such a big site. We know the issues at Broxden, but it was a safety valve actually for us. So if there's something happening by the time the pause and review takes place and we know there are problems, we can actually initiate some further improvements as part of the development. So it really is it's a twofold thing. It's a safety check in terms of, well, let's actually see what's actually happening in the real world, and if we need to do anything more about it, and actually in terms of the modal shift, let's see what's happening, because it is hopefully quite a sustainable site. So we do expect some sort of change in modal shift. How much that change is going to be, we don't really know, but that's what the pause and review is actually there for.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. Oh. Councillor Braun, you want to put forward a motion?
thank you, Corinne. That's all right with you. I jumped the gun a bit there, but yes, I'm putting a motion forward as the original committee which approved this. I'm moving that we accept the paper as is. This is a major development for Perth with various infrastructure here, which will be important to Perth. It will be a lot of employment for people, more housing, which of course we do need. So I would like to move that we accept the paper as is. It's a very important parts here for us. I would hope perhaps as things develop, as we know are developing, the hydrogen fueling and the electric charging point might be built first, because that's a need, I think, which people will give confidence for people to change their vehicles. So I'm going to move the paper. The only, say, a slight reservation I have is the question of the medical side. I appreciate this is going to be a long time in the future. We don't know what things are going to happen as the years roll by, but it's a caution there. I think that we are seeing a lot of building, 1,500 houses here, Bertha Park, and building everywhere else. We know that there's problems with GPs. We heard that in full council last week. Another GP practice potentially closing. So I think it's a caution we should have, not just here but in the future. And I take the words you said, Mr. Banton, that this will be checked. checked. So yes, I'm happy to move the paper as is. Thank you.
Councillor Braun, can I just ask you, just to clarify that you're supporting the updated paper?
I'm sorry, yeah, the new paper, yes, definitely.
Councillor McLaren, Bailey McLaren, sorry, I do apologise. Bailey McLaren.
Thank you, convener. I would be happy to second Councillor Braun's motion. For this updated application, there's clearly been a huge amount of tenacity, determination and vision attributed to this transformational application. And I do look forward to seeing the progress and detailed applications that will come before this committee in due course. As I say, I'm happy to second the updated application as is presented to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask if there's an amendment, any amendment? No amendments. Therefore, planning permission is granted. Thank you. Subject to the legal agreement. Right, we swiftly move on to 521, the local application, which is the extension to a warehouse office to form additional office space, class 2 product development, food preparation area with associated storage and distribution, class 6 at House of Brewer, Pitgowan, Blair Athol, Pitlochray. And to introduce this report is Mr. Williamson. Thank you.
Thank you, convener, and good morning, councillors. And the second application on the agenda today is for a small-scale commercial development to expand the existing operation at House of Brewer, west of Blair Athol. This application has been referred to this meeting as a result of the receipt of 8 letters of representation objecting to the proposals. As outlined in the committee report, reasons for objection included compliance with development plan policies, impacts on residential and visual amenity, road safety, noise, vermin and loss of trees. I will now take the committee through a short presentation to detail the proposals further. Next slide, please. This first plan shows an aerial view of the location of the site at Pitgowan, which lies a short distance west of Blair Athol, just off the A9. As can be seen on this view, the actual access is taken off the B847, which connects through to Calvine and Struan. The wider site itself is characterised by the existing commercial development and its backdrop to the north against the existing woodland leading to the Falls of Brewer. Next slide, please. This next slide shows a closer image of the overall site, with the buildings located to the north and car parking in the foreground. To the west is a small hamlet of around 10 dwellings, separated from the site by existing woodland. Next slide, please. Here we see the existing and proposed site plans side by side. This shows the layout of the extension covering approximately 500 square metres, tagging onto the existing building at the top of the site. This area is currently partially mounded and treed. Next slide, please. This next slide shows the floor plan and landscaping plan. This shows that 12 trees would be removed to accommodate the proposals, although a total of 46 trees are proposed to compensate for this. In terms of accommodation, the ground floor would comprise stores and a prep room. Next slide, please. Next, we have the first floor plan showing offices and product development space and remaining elevations of the building. As outlined in section 3 of the committee report, the external finish of the building would be green profiled sheeting to match the neighbouring building. Next slide, please. This last slide shows a more detailed plan of the proposed placement planting, which would be largely to the rear and to the north of the proposed building. Next slide, please. We now move on to a series of photographs. This first photograph shows the view from beside the main complex of buildings within the car park, looking northwards towards the mail order building, offices and sale/retail outlet. This also illustrates the relationship with the adjacent woodland and slightly rising topography beyond. Next slide, please. The next image shows the proposed site of the new extension, which would be to the left-hand side of the existing building, where the mounded embankment is at present. As noted earlier, the proposal would result in the removal of a total of 12 trees in the vicinity of the building footprint. Next slide, please. Now we see the view from the west of the proposed building, looking back towards the existing retail, offices and stores building. The proposal would be built to match the external appearance of these buildings and would tie in at the same ridge height. Next slide, please. This last photo shows the view from the site of the building, looking westwards towards the existing bank of woodland, which separates the site from the cluster of residential properties beyond, which are approximately 70 metres away as identified in the report. Next slide, please. Thank you, Convener. That now concludes my presentation. I will leave members with the proposed site plan for reference.
Thank you, Mr. Williamson. As I said in the introduction, the applicant, I believe it's Mr. Birkbeck, is here to answer any questions that the committee have. Does the committee have any questions for the applicant? Mr. Yes, please. Thank you. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Mr. Birkbeck, for coming along. The objectors mention the risk of extra vermin, the risk of disadvantage due to smells, and the risk of light effect or the view affecting their property. Do you have any comments on those three concerns?
Yeah, so I think vermin, I don't really see that there'll be any risk of vermin. I would hope that we maintain the property in a suitable fashion. We employ Graham's Pest Control for all that sort of stuff. I don't really see that as an issue. The view lines, we will maintain all of the trees, foliage, whatever, between Pittergowan and the new development site. And the third question was light pollution. The view lines, sorry. And the smells, yeah, no, I mean, we will have to have some extraction, but we cannot keep developing the site without some extra help for our catering facilities. So I don't see that there will be a pollution of smells.
Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. Thank you for being here this morning. My question is about light pollution. There was a comment here about external lighting causing a problem. I understand that if you use LED lighting, you can direct that much more easily. Will you be using LED lights to light the external area of the property?
So at present, we don't really have any intention to light this new development. I think where the objection will have come from is actually more to do with light pollution closer to the B road, the old A9, and closer to the main building. And actually, I'm meeting one of the local community this evening to discuss that.
Just on the question. The other point, I know it's nothing to do with planning, but one of the things that's been pointed out is there seems to be problems with the fire alarms going off. It says there've been several faults. I appreciate it's not planning, but is it something you want to comment on? As an objection that people have raised.
Fire alarms is an interesting one. We have just upgraded, and I have to say spent a lot of money on upgrading the fire alarm system so that we don't automatically get the fire brigade out on the first fire alarm. In truth, I really don't see it as a big problem, and the number of fire alarms that we have is pretty minimal. Same as security alarms, which used to be a problem. I used to live at Brewer. I used to live in a flat there. My now wife would complain about it a lot. But we've got much better systems than we used to have, and technology has changed.
Seems to be no further questions. So you're free to go, Mr. Berwick. Thank you. Can I ask members if they have any questions for officers? No questions for officers? So can I ask if we approve the paper and allow planning permission? Okay, great. Thank you. Planning permission is then granted. Thank you. And that is us for today. So thank you for your time. Have a nice day. Thank you.